I love being in Radiohead and, contributing stuff like that. But if I'm really, really honest, for me, there was something that's just missing.
Evening, everyone. I hope wherever you're listening to this, you are staying safe and staying sane. Tonight's episode of the podcast was recorded in the second week of January, which, with everything going on, I'm sure you'll agree, now feels like a lifetime ago, given that we're now into April and a huge chunk of the world's population is living in lockdown. Ed O'Brien from Radiohead is my guest this evening, and in recent weeks, Ed has been unwell with what he suspects was coronavirus. He had the symptoms. I was very pleased and relieved to watch a video that he posted on social media at the end of March saying that he'd recovered and was feeling much better. So sending my best wishes to Ed and everyone else, in fact, who's been affected by what's going on right now. Like I said, this Midnight Chats was done before most of us had even heard of social distancing, recorded early in this new decade, the very beginning of 2020. Ed has made a solo album under the name EOB. It's called Earth and comes out on the 17th of April. We talk a bit about why he's chosen now, 30 odd years into the career of Radiohead, to share this debut, and so much more. Thank you to Ed for being so immediately warm and open, especially talking about his experiences with depression and self-confidence. I'm sure lots of big Radiohead fans will be tuning into this, and Ed was forthcoming talking about the band, but also I hope you'll get something out of this even if you're not. Ed Sheeran, Glastonbury, male rock star cliches and the age of authenticity. There are his thoughts on lots of other topics during our chat. If you're a first-time listener to Midnight Chats, please do subscribe wherever you're listening to this to get all of the new conversations we put out. It's great when people share links and review the podcast. Normally, I'd stick a plug in here for Loud and Quiet, the music magazine and website we make alongside this. But right now, like so many other small businesses, we are spending a bit of time just figuring out what the hell we're going to do. So in the meantime, there is now a donate button on the website, loudandquiet.com, if you do want to support what we do. But on with tonight's podcast. This is episode 91 of Midnight Chats with Ed O'Brien. Ed, welcome to Midnight Chats. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
How has 2020 started for you? Has it started in relaxed fashion or has it been busy from the outset?
It started off, it was a good Christmas. If I'm honest, I struggled as we entered this new decade. I went through one of my kind of quite rare patches of being sort of feeling quite despondent about it all. I mean, and now I feel much better. And I don't know, maybe that's also, when you feel crap, that can also be you've eaten too much at Christmas. But I definitely felt, usually when you enter a new decade, there's a big fanfare, isn't there? There's a lot of the years ahead, but there's nothing of this. And I think, I'm definitely feeling what a lot of people feel, apprehensive, nervous, unsure. It's been a balance.
We'll come on to talking about the album that you're releasing, and it's actually full of quite a lot of optimism, generally speaking. But when you're going through a period like that, do you have any kind of rituals to just get yourself to sort of think more optimistically, kind of get yourself out of that fog, that kind of negative thought cycle?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of things. I've been doing a lot of things for quite a long time that really, really help me. So, for instance, the big thing for me that I started 17, 18 years ago was meditation. So that's kind of, I have things like that, and I run or do exercise. I try to eat well. I've tried to eliminate sugars. There are all these things that, 20 years ago, for a long time I suffered from depression. And I realized that it wasn't like a chronic depression, but it was like this low-level depression. And I took out a lot of stuff, and that's when I gave up drinking about 17, 18 years ago. That was the first thing you go, oh God, I feel so much better already. And then suddenly certain foods and taking out sugars was a massive thing for me. I had this thing called Candida, which some of your listeners might know about or not have, and it's pretty hard. That's big links to depression there as well. So it's kind of rare that it hits. So when it hits, and it was like going back, it was just, and so I think I've got to the stage now where I think it's important, to be a human being on this planet. I think if I was to go around going, oh, well, it's all okay, it's all going to be okay, it's like, you're not really feeling it, and it is hard, and it doesn't matter. Listen, and I keep on saying this, my life and the life that I've lived, I've won the lottery, but I do say this, if I'm feeling it, Christ knows what other people who don't have the good fortune that I have and the life that I've lived and and also it goes back to the other thing. We are all connected in this. It doesn't matter how comfortable your life is, or we are all connected to what's going on. And there's no doubt that what's going on is a huge change. There's a massive, this period in history will be looked at as a pivotal point in the history of humanity, no doubt about it. And so you need to feel, and for me it was just like, okay, I need to feel this. I am genuinely and generally an optimistic person. I do have incredible faith in humanity, human beings. However, there are times when it just seems overwhelmingly shit. And sorry to get so heavy.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's interesting to hear about
it. I have to be honest about this, and it's kind of it. But I think it's important because it's important to feel that. I think only through that can you be empathetic and have compassion for people genuinely. If you feel that, so when you get these periods, that for me is the moment to try and go for walks. Just simplify. Sit by a fire, read a book. I read an amazing book. I was very lucky. It's a book called The Overstory by Richard Powers, which is the best book I've read for years. And it's so prescient. It's so now. And that was, again, the timing of that was absolutely perfect. And I sort of finished the book. And as I finished the book, the darkness left. When you said what are there things, there are many things, and there are many things that I do to stay optimistic, to stay hopeful, because I think, again, being hopeful at this time is a really, really important thing. Hope is what we need, because hope inspires you. It motivates you, doesn't it?
I think it's interesting what you're saying about how you have to engage, because not engaging and kind of pretending it's not happening is to not be part of the solution or move things forward. So what do you do in those periods? Do you find that you do have to back away from watching the evening news or going on Twitter for a couple of days or weeks just to sort of have this momentary quiet and then jump back into it?
Yeah, I think you have to be a good gatekeeper. I mean, I avoid Twitter anyway. I mean, I've got starting a presence, but I prefer, for instance, if it's social media, it would be Instagram. It just seems to be the energy, it seems to be nicer. So Twitter is a bit of a shit fest, and I avoid it. And the evening news and the papers, so read the papers. I don't read them during the week. I might hear the news on the radio. Again, you have to be careful. And I went through a period when I realized, this sort of 20 odd years ago, that I had this depression that had been, and it got quite acute around the time of after, the touring of OK Computer. And it was as much as well, it was crisis in the way I was living my life and all that stuff. And these things I look at them as opportunities as well. Like when you hit a crisis, well, it usually means that there's a reason you've got to change what's doing. So, and I learned then to be a good gatekeeper. I mean, for 5-6 years in the sort of the early noughties, I didn't read a paper. I didn't see any news because it all became too much. And I'd been sort of, not a heavy activist, but mild activism. I used to go on the May Day rallies, and I think it was the 2003 Iraq War. That was sort of it was around that time that was sort of a watershed moment for me, because it was a time when I gave up drinking. It was the time when I had to, and I realized, we'd had the whole 9/11 thing, and I realized how upset and disappointed I was with our government at the time and the politicians and our political and business elites, that everybody at that time, 2 million of us, all, and plus those who didn't march, all knew what was going on about that Iraq invasion, the potential invasion, and the Prime Minister at the time, Blair, and his inner cabal decided that they'd already aligned with George Bush. And we all know, we know the story, despite his protestations. They declared, and for me, and I'm a student as well, I studied politics and economics at university, so I had a great interest in politics and stuff like that. And after that, I was just like, this is shit. This is absolutely bollocks. So I stopped. So again, I've digressed slightly. I had a great trainer about 10 years ago, and he said, listen, you don't help the world by going down. If your energy is crap and you don't help the world, so you have to pull yourself out and do those things that make you more buoyant, make you a human being that can help this planet and where we are.
What kind of hopeful things are you concentrating on then? Is that things like looking at the young people around me? You've got a young family, like looking at school children protesting against climate change and hitting the streets of London in the autumn of last year. Are you kind of, do you zone in on those things and think, no, I'm going to my positive energy is going to join their positive energy.
Yeah, totally.
And that's how I'm feeling.
Totally.
Buoyant.
And lots of things. Black Lives Matter. Me too. I mean, for all the crap that's happening, and this is the thing that this is the thing, it's not like holding on to it. What seems to be, what I think, but what seems to be happening is we're going through this huge moment of change. And this system that we're all part of, this current economic structure, and I'm not going to say capitalism because that immediately puts in the anti-capitalist, it's not socialism, not this economic structure, which socialism has been a part of as well as capitalism. It doesn't work. This is the thing that people realize. It doesn't serve 99% of humanity, and it certainly doesn't serve the planet. So I think what's happening is this is the moment that it's breaking up. So that's why you've got all this change and all this chaos and stuff. But there are amazing things like the Me Too movement, like Black Lives Matter, like Greta Thunberg, like the schools. These things, and this is powerful stuff. And it's got a different energy from, say, when I was a student. When I was a student, in the 80s, it was on the back of things like the miners' strike, 84. I went to university in Manchester, 87. It was quite a politicized environment. But it was all about the energy. It was really interesting. And it was what I grew up with. It was all about a fight. It's all about the struggle. And, I used to go on these demos and anti-war marches. And, I remember a great Clause 28 march in Manchester, which was the government was going to stop teaching, or I can't even remember, but all I knew it was anti-gay. So it was like, got to stand up for, our brothers and sisters in that community. And I think the difference is now that the energy is different. I mean, it's different times, but it was always a fight. And I think when you meet force with force, I've learnt this in life. If you go into a situation and you say, fuck you, I'm going to fight you, all you do is you cause more. You meet that other force and it just gets bigger and bigger. And it then becomes all about, it's about how much force have you got. And, if you're the government or your powers of me, you've got more force. So that's how it always ends. So after the march on Iraq, I didn't, in fact, this year with Extinction Rebellion was the first time, so however many years, 16 years later, first time I'd sort of gone out on the streets, because again I was like anti this thing, and what did that achieve? What did that march achieve? Absolutely nothing. A moment of solidarity with a lot of people. I read this quote and it was from Mother Teresa, and she said, and it's a very subtle thing, and she said, I won't go on any anti-war march, but I'll go on every pro-peace march. And I was like, well, what's the difference? No, there's actually a big difference, because one is, by anti is meeting force with force. That's where I'd come from. The pro-peace thing is, no, this is the vision. This is the thing that I want. And that's the energy that I'm going to direct. Does that make sense? Yeah, and then I'm like, oh, and I think that's what so when I went last year, I was like Extinction Rebellion. I thought, this is it. And the way they were doing it was beautiful and brilliant. And I went to see some of them in their offices, their rooms. It was really interesting. The energy was so different, and lots and lots of, if I can say, female energy, which a lot of the old activism seemed to be very male, and it was stuck in that kind of, again, struggle, fight. And it's different. I think what's really interesting now is that activism is taking a far more enlightened form. And, and I think the emergence of, again, for want of a better word I'm trying to find, but that feminine energy, it's like, it's more enlightened. But guys tend to result to, that kind of, again, you look at all the crap that's going on in the world. It's a very basic thing. If you do statistics, it's all young men. Yeah. It's fucking all men. I mean, I know it's a really obvious thing to say, but, after years of studying politics and stuff, you look at it, it's usually men. That what's going on, that general who was just blitzed by an American cruise missile or whatever, or a drone, he was a warmongering Iranian general. Who's the president? He's a man. I don't want to get too much into it, but I am hopeful because I think actually, again, another bigger picture is the world needs more females. It needs more, it needs more, and it has been a patriarchy for thousands of years. There's no doubt about it. But for me, it feels like it's changing and people are waking up to that.
These are causes, some of the causes that have kind of almost that have developed into bigger conversations, say the last couple of years. We're talking about climate change, for example, music declares emergency, Extinction Rebellion. These are topics, these are areas that you've kind of been banging the drum for quite a long time, like in terms of your own activism and Radiohead as well, in terms of the charities and people that you've chosen to work with over the years. So in that sense, are you just pleased to see some of this rise to the surface and just see some encouraging signs on that front? Because you were out there on your own, perhaps doing it for a while.
I don't think we were out there on our own. I think it was just bloody obvious. It's just like, you just have to have make trade fair and all this stuff and Greenpeace. And it's just, it's not rocket science. I mean, we didn't discover this stuff. We were just reading about it, and and you notice what's going on in the world and you go, this needs to be changed. This seems incredibly unfair. This seems unbalanced. This doesn't seem right. So I don't think we were particularly... No, I just think it's... I just feel like... I don't know whether I'm happy. I think it's inspiring to see so many young people. And I think that is the big thing. This generation, the millennials even, and the Generation Zers, as they call them, and then the kids to follow... They're different, and they're, and you hear all these cliches about people like saying, "Oh, the kids are, they're," but I think there's so much truth in that. I really do. They're different, and maybe we grew up. So I was born in '68. Britain in the '70s was a pretty, even I grew up in middle class Oxford. There was a lot of darkness. You had material comfort, like there was food on your plate and stuff like that, but you didn't have, I think emotionally as a society, we've developed a lot more. Your emotional needs weren't met. I came from a split family. Nowadays, if you had a split family, there would be concern about the kids, and the kids might even have someone to talk to. Back in '78, when my parents split up, I had one uncle who gave me 20 quid and said, "I feel for you, Eddie." So I think it was... But I think the kids nowadays, obviously there are a lot of kids who have a lot of shit, and particularly in inner cities, and particularly on, the ones living below the poverty. But in terms of the middle classes, I think their emotional needs are a lot better met. Parents give kids a lot more attention nowadays. And I think that means that they grow up having a sense of self and knowing and feeling secure in themselves, which we never did. And they don't spend the first 30 years of their lives going around like headless chickens, like we are, like, I'm fucked, I'm going to drink, I'm going to take drugs. You know what? To fill a kind of an emotional hole. Whereas kids now go, no, I don't need to, I feel good, I'm pretty, and that's great. And that's really good. So I think that's a big change. And it was interesting when the Occupy stuff happened, my wife and I we had little kids, so we couldn't, but got to know some and said, how can we help? Well, we took down some gas canisters for their cooking down to, where they were down in St. Paul's. And what was really interesting, like the woman that I got to know, she's like 27, 28, and the relation, and she was so cool and like a millennial, and like really, like, again, her energy, I was like, it was like, that horrible thing that people say, oh, you seem wise beyond your years. Well, I knew very few people, 27, 28, who had her kind of wisdom and her kind of... But it was interesting because she has an amazing relationship with her parents and I talked to her about it, and she'd go like, well, like they take an interest in my emotions. They're like, maybe there's this correlation. I'm, amateur psychology there.
The fact that we're going to talk about a new album that you're releasing is not unconnected, but it's not unconnected to all the stuff that we just talked about, because thematically there are many levels to it. There's the personal, but there's also very much this sense of the bigger picture. I mean, the album's called Earth, right?
Yeah.
So the minutiae of kind of human relationships and the things that are close to you on a day-to-day basis, and then something much bigger. There's a sense of something much bigger going on, which is exactly what we've just been talking about, isn't it? I suppose the first question on the subject of the album is kind of an obvious one, that, having been in the band, having been in Radiohead for 35 odd years now, 9 albums done, why now to release your debut solo record?
That's a good question, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It should be the kind of thing you're doing like I was doing 20 years ago. I think partly because... So I started it back in really 2013. My kids were born in 2004, 2006. And those initial years of parenthood with the band, I had no other time. And I was very, very, very... Again, like because I mentioned I came from a split family. I wanted to be... There were periods of time that I was away, obviously with Radiohead, quite a lot of time. So when I was home, I wanted to be home. I wanted to be really present, and I wanted to roll my sleeves up. I wanted to really do it because for me, when my son was born, it's like the love bomb going off. It's like everything changes. I mean, it was just so huge. And also this whole other thing kicked in. It was just like, this fucking music thing. I mean, small potatoes compared to parenthood. This is my purpose. My purpose is to raise these children so that they leave our house and they can be positive, good members of the human race. And literally it's that. And that thing, and it's like, that's nature kicked in, totally. 2012, so my daughter she was 6, my son was 8. Suddenly you're no longer, it's not so much hands-on. We were very lucky after we toured, what was the album called? King of Limbs. After we toured King of Limbs, I'd said previously 5 years to the guys, I said, I want to go and live in Brazil with my family. My wife's mother's from Guyana. My wife and I have traveled in Brazil. We had in South America, and we had such a love for Brazilian music and Brazilian culture and the emotion of being in Brazil and being in this incredible country. Light and shade, there's a lot of darkness there. And so we went out and lived there, and life was reduced to, we were living in a sort of a small kind of adobe house that wasn't much bigger than this room, but living next to a waterfall. And it was really idyllic, and there was no mobile phone, and there was a signal, there was internet, Wi-Fi, very, very slow, like, circa 98.
Dial-up style.
Yeah, exactly. That was about a 10-minute walk away. And suddenly there was all this time, and the kids went to the little village school. I had this itch that I wanted to scratch. I knew there was something always missing. When I look back on it, like, I love being in Radiohead and, contributing stuff like that. But if I'm really, really honest, for me, there was something that's just missing. And I realized once I got into the whole songwriting thing, it's like, oh my God, this is it. This is, I'd written bits and pieces, but not lyrics. I'd written some music, and I kind of got into it more around the time of OK Computer, and I was building up a few tunes, but, no lyrics as such. And then around the time of Kid A, that's when my life reached a sort of crisis with depression and stuff like that, and everything just shuts down. And that was about 99, 2000. So 2012 comes out, and I suddenly go, I've got this time, and I start getting into rhythm of it. And I find a way to write. That's the other thing. I didn't know how to write music. I didn't know. I didn't find a method that worked for me. And I found a method.
Is that because it had always been a collaborative thing? You'd never really spent time away on your own building something up from scratch?
Yeah, and I'd never seen the process that Tom had got to when he presented a song to the band that sometimes needed no arrangement. Other times we would hammer out arrangements and parts and stuff like that. But I never saw the process that he'd undergone. Like maybe he'd started a song with a riff 3 years previously, and just the process of just going back to something. Oh, I like that. So that one of the things I read, like there were useful. There's lots of good book stuff. There's this book called The Artist's Way, which was actually someone gave that to me, and it was really helpful. And the big thing for me was that initial stage of creativity when you're in the flow, and it's almost like a semi-meditative state, and you're there, and stuff is coming out. What I learned was that's not the time to get your editorial head in, because if you start judging at the time, you'll go, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. And that's what I did constantly for years. This is shit, this is not your shit, this is no good, this is shit. What I learned to do was like that initial flurry, I was just, whatever I enjoyed, whatever moved me, bang. Then you can edit. You edit at a later stage. You go back to, you go, oh, I like that bit. Like, oh, I'll work on that. So you then kind of get back into that state and work on it again. And it was a process of discovery for me. And I mean, it was completely intoxicating. Once I started, I love that moment. And I'm not experiencing this, so I'm looking forward to the next time but the moment when a song or this thing comes to you, and it is like it comes through. I'm sure all musicians say this. Once you learn to let go and it comes through you, and it's kind of like this thing, this dream happens, and it's like the potential of the song or what you're doing, you suddenly go, wow, it could be like this. And that's such an amazing feeling, because that's like dreaming it up. It's like, wow. The hard part is realizing that potential and fulfilling it. And that's I guess the craft. The easier part is, or the most where you're fully kind of emotionally charged up are those initial stages, for me at least. And actually the latter stages, when the dream is being realized, it's the bits in the middle and you're going, how the fuck are we going to get here? You go, on my record, I went into the sonic trenches big time, and 5-6 weeks, and it's like wading through mud. It's like lack of clarity. But that's the journey.
You mentioned there that you've always been quite hard on yourself. There's a sort of self-depreciating quote that comes with the album, where you mention that Tom's obviously made solo music, Philip and Johnny as well, and you say the world didn't need a shit solo record from me. Yeah. So like, would you just never had the confidence to do it? Like what was holding you back?
Probably a bit of that. I didn't have the confidence, that's for sure. If you don't have the confidence, then you're not going to be able to do it. I didn't think it was my place to be singing and writing lyrics. I didn't think I was capable. I didn't think I could do it. And I was aware that, there can be a trend of people in bands like Radiohead. Everybody has solo projects. I really, really love and respect what Tom, Johnny and Philip have done, and how amazing is the drummer of a band like Radiohead. He's working with a Rombert band. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's a completely different head for him as well, going from behind the drum kit to doing it. So I was so in respect, and it's like, in a way, I didn't want to I thought, oh, well, if I brought something out, I'd fucking taint the legacy of not only Radiohead, but them. So I was just like, the world doesn't need a shit record for me. So that kind of held me back for a long time. And I had very, very, very little self-confidence in that regard. I mean, a big thing for me was lack of confidence it's a funny thing, because too much lack of confidence is debilitating. But I also think that humility is a good thing as well. I'm a real believer. I really think that it's, all the twats I met have never been humble. And all the good people. For me, it was suddenly like these songs started coming, and I was like, we left Brazil and we'd come back to Britain. I was in my shed in the garden. I was just like, oh my God, I'm feeling this. And then it's a process. I then went and demoed with the wonderful Ian Davenport, who works with Gaz Coombs and stuff like in Courtyard Studios in Oxfordshire, and we demoed him, and he was like, this is good, man. And it's a little bit different, bringing the whole Brazil, and he said, you can sing this. I was like, no, I can't sing it. I'll get someone, And he kept on saying it over a 2-year period. And then finally, the session before I had a week in demoing before we went in at so we're talking September 2014, the week before Radiohead reconvened to make a Moonshaped Pool. I went in and there was a moment I heard something in my vocals. I was just like, oh, I like that. And I said, yeah. And he said, I've been telling you for 2 years. I needed to believe it, but for me it was the music and then just doing it. You just have to do it. It's like I'm apprehensive about going out there and playing live. But if it's anything like the way that it's been, you've just got to do it. You know, you just got to jump in there full. And you have to understand that it's a process. And for me, the thing that I've sort of held on to, it's the start. I remember what the start was like with Radiohead. Our first album, apart from one song, maybe half a song, was shit. Pablo Honey wasn't a very good album. The Bends was a good album, you know, much stronger. But the way that you can evolve, and that for me is just like, I stopped being so hard on myself. I stopped saying, I mean, the hard part was I wanted to realize the potential that I felt about these songs. But I also was like, don't stay tinkering away for 5-6 years in a studio to get what you think is perfect. Get what you think is what moves you, move on. And I'm lucky because I got to stage the album and I really liked it. I really loved it. And it's like, okay, great. I can move on from that. So I got to that place on the flight. Okay, I'm really happy with this. Took a while to get there. So, I think I was desperately unconfident.
Have you played the album to the rest of the band now?
No, because partly because we're all in different places now. We occasionally get together for meetings, but everybody's doing stuff. So Philip asked, he wanted to hear it, so I sent him a copy. You know, everybody's doing their thing, and it's great, and it's all very different as well. I mean, I think what's interesting probably for people who like Radiohead, and everybody's stuff is really quite different, and I think that reflects how different we all are within the space of Radiohead. And I think Radiohead as a filter for, if all 5 of us, the management always used to say this years and years ago. They said, well, are all 5 of you happy? Really, all 5 of you. Not just 3, not just 1, 5. And if all 5 of us, they said, well, that's right.
It's interesting because I think through the solo projects, in a weird way, it's almost like deconstructing Radiohead, because you can hear people's contributions to the whole that becomes Radiohead eventually. And I think that's certainly the case now. This is the opportunity for people to hear your contribution to Radiohead, because through this record, I'm like, oh, clearly that's something that Ed brings when they get together.
Can you feel that? Do you get a sense of that?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
That's interesting, yeah.
In terms of like filling in the gaps for me about the stuff we've just spoken about, so you moved to Brazil with your family. That was a big moment for the sort of crystallization and the beginnings of these ideas. You came home. How did you go about? I mean, this was worked on, part recorded, written in between sessions for a Moonshaped Pool.
Yeah.
So the gap between basically 2014 and 2019, what happened? Where were you? And how did you go about assembling the people that have worked with you on this record?
So 2014, it was kind of like down tools because I'm entering a Radiohead cycle. So we started in September 2014. That record was finished January 2016. We go out on tour spring 2016, and the tour takes us through to 2019. It was going to be 2018, and that's when I said I was going to start. I was then going to do the album, but then, what happened was that everybody wanted to do a tour, and I said, all right, and I had to stop making my album to go out. So I got to the stage with a lot of the songs. They were all ready to go and ready to be recorded 2014, but there was no chance. You know, it's a different head as well. You know, for me being in Radiohead and doing my thing, it's very, very different space, and it's not. I wasn't able to find to bounce between the two. Didn't feel possible. You had to be all in with each one. Different energies, very, very. I think that's the main thing. Very different energies. They're like entering two totally different worlds for me. What I decided to do in that period. Okay, so I can't record. What can I do? I can start dreaming up, getting my team together. So the first thing I wanted to do was producer. Who's my favourite producer in the world? Flood. Well, aren't I lucky? Because Flood's kids are at the same school, and our wives got to know one another. They were trying to the food at the school was atrocious for the kids, and there were four or five of them who were on this sort of talking to the school about, come on, we need to engage with this. So Susan, my wife, was just like, do you know a guy called Flood? I said, well, no, but I mean, he's only my favourite fucking record producer. And it was great. And
I love that this basically started by almost by the school gates.
Totally. I love it. And to me, this is, and I'm glad you picked up, I love the fact it starts at school gates. Because, like I said, my family's so important. I come from this thing. And I wanted this thing, the energy of this record and the energy we made it to be inclusive. It's not an exclusive boys club. It's an inclusive. It's love-centered. It's heart-based. So it starts at the school gates. And he, like the Foals record, so this is 2013. The Foals record has been Holy Fire come out, and I love that record. And I said to him, and I was a little bit nervous again. I said, someone introduced me and said, this is Flood and this is Ed. I went, oh, hi. I said, listen, I fucking love Holy Fire. And he was like, well, it's just pop music, innit? And we started this conversation and this friendship developed. And our families, we went on holiday to Greece together. And he became a really good friend. Our friendship blossomed so quickly. And it was great having somebody who, I mean, he's a sonic genius, the guy. I mean, that's a whole other thing. Like, he's on a level of sonics I've never met in anybody else. It's almost, he's so talented. So he's got this incredible gift. I've never met anybody who's like that. But anyway, he to be able to talk to him about, about life and family and music and studios and recordings and bands, and I mean, it's like the perfect friendship, right?
Yeah, totally.
And we'd be they would come to New Year to our house in Wales, and we'd be down by the river, talking as the dust settled, telling me about certain sessions that he's done, and not, we've got a lot of stories, there's a lot of history, and we did a lot of comparing about the positive aspects and the negative aspects of music and the industry and everything. So he became a great friend. First of all, I wanted to know what he thought about the demos that I'd been doing. So I went to Assault and Battery in the summer of, I think it was 2015. I was nervous, and sat there. And after about 4 songs, he turned around and he said, do you want me to work with this? And I was like, fuck yeah. I didn't even have to kind of like ask him. He said, would you like me to work on this? And then boom, we were locked in. And so went from there. I mean, the other thing was the personnel.
There was effectively a kind of house band that you put together,
yeah.
Right? And then beyond that, well, let's start with that. But I do want to ask you about the fact that there's a couple of other voices, a couple of other contributors to the album as well. Yeah.
When I was demoing in 2013, I think Random Access Memories, Daft Punk had come out. And obviously, all the tunes on that, particularly, Get Lucky was everybody loves, an incredible song. Obviously Nile Rodgers is a big part of that. However, I saw that the Grammy, someone showed me the Grammy rehearsal footage of them. There's Stevie Wonder and there's Pharrell and there's the Robots and there's Nile Rodgers. But like, oh my God, that's Omar Hakim on drums and Nathan East on bass. So like in my head when I was demoing, I wanted those guys. They're the best at what they do. They are... And I wanted that energy, that joy, that energy, and that obviously supreme musicians. But with people like that, they bring in this history, but this energy. It's really deep. And so they were on my wish list. And I kept, my natural self-deprecating self at times, like, I'm not worthy. And then I just turned around and I was like, hang on a sec, whoa. It's a bit like going to Brazil for 7 months. It's like, you're in this incredible situation. You're in this band, Radiohead, and sometimes you forget like how people perceive Radiohead. So just ask. They're not going to, you find out the manager's number, they're not going to turn you away and go, fuck off. They're going to like, oh, you're the guy, you're playing Radiohead. Oh, well, yeah, sure. I phoned up Omar, we were on tour, and I remember we were on tour in New Orleans, and I think it was 2016. And I talked to him, I said, I want to record. I talked to Flood about this. I said, I want to start the record off in Wales, because Wales had been a place, after I come back from Brazil, that's a place that I would go off and write, and I found it incredibly fertile place. I mean, it's mid Wales where Robert Plant has has written a lot. So there's something magical about that land, and we've got a lot of friends there now as well from going back there. And so Omar said, I said 3 weeks. I want to get Nathan, another guy called David Akumu, and he said, okay, he was intrigued. Nathan was the same. And obviously not the last person, but he was actually the first on my list, was David Akumu, and who's an extraordinary musician, human being, light. And he was the first name on the list. I thought, I need David. He's an extraordinary, he's producer, singer, everything. I need somebody like that who knows where I come from. That was the thing that really intrigued me, was like, if you had a rhythm section like Nathan and Omar, and you met it, which is a very, very African-American, very African-American background, and you meet that with this European sonic sensibility, that's the place that I was really interested in. Yeah, and we had 3 weeks. We had a mobile set up in the autumn of October 2018.
There are some other people that contributed to the record.
Yeah.
The album starts with a track called Shangri-La that I want to ask you about in a moment, but it closes with a track that is ultimately a duet between yourself and Laura Marlin. Yeah. Why did you approach Laura Marlin?
Because she's the best.
Yeah.
I mean, and like the mantra became like when I was just like, when I had the dream list and Omar and David and Nathan were on board, I'm like, well, and that's the other thing, Flood. I had Flood. And I realized, like, why would I not ask the best? So again, I was on tour. I sent an email to Laura. I didn't know. I loved her music, and I love watching her as an artist. And she was so young when she started, 15, 16.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she's made 6 albums, right? I mean, it's extraordinary. And then so I met up with her, just talked about the idea, and she seemed to be into the idea. It was just a great afternoon. She knew Catherine as well a bit, Catherine Marks, who was also a very important part of the record. I wanted to bring the team together that had kind of done Holy Fire. So Catherine and Flood and Alan Moulder mixing, or Alan had co-produced and mixed and stuff. Catherine and Cecil, who also engineered the record. Catherine knew Laura. Laura came in for an afternoon and she did some backing vocals on Mass, but on Cloak of the Night, it was, for me, that was the most nerve-wracking part of the record, because I've got to sing. I'm singing and playing guitar with Laura Marlin. Right,
because of her almost like intimidating vocal ability.
Oh my God. I mean, she can do it. She just does it. I'm a novice. I'm an absolute novice at this game. So, she's done years and years of singing and doing this. In that stage, I'm still learning about my voice. My voice, needs to go out on the road. I haven't been out on the road doing that. So in the studio, it was kind of like a bit hit and miss for me. I think it was good that I was nervous. There's a fragility to certainly what I'm singing, and I think the strength in the two voices. I had the words and I had my vocal line and guitar that I was playing, and I just said, let's just see what happens. And she immediately sort of hit a seam, and it's just such it's again so intoxicating to be able to sing with somebody like that. It's like, wow, it makes you sound better. It's like they say about great actors. You work with a great actor or whatever, isn't they say they make you better, they make you look better.
Well, it's definitely like an impressive team that you put together to make the album, because it sounds like everybody brought something different that created the whole in the end, obviously.
Yeah.
The album opens with Shangri-La. Yeah. If people are kind of familiar, maybe if people's minds wander immediately to Shangri-La at Glastonbury Festival, there is a direct connection. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how and when you wrote that song, and it was pretty much after you headlined Glastonbury in 2017, right?
Yeah, well, it wasn't headlined. I think it was 2014. We went to Glastonbury and had we hadn't played, but, Glastonbury's a really important few days for me and my wife and our friends, and it feels like you reconnect with your tribe. I'm never happier than 4:00 in Shangri-La, and I came back and I was so inspired by being there that I wanted to write about that feeling, but I wanted to write about also, it's not just about that. It's about a personal journey. It's about leaving the shit behind. It's moving forward, however hard that might be, finding the people, finding the tribe, finding the people that you resonate with, that felt like that idea. And in my mind, it is like finding the ultimate part of your tribe, your people in the middle of the woods. It's a bit like, that whole acid house thing had a profound effect on my generation, me and stuff like that. And I suppose it's kind of there as well. I know it's easy to remember the darker aspects of it, but it was such a profoundly important moment in social history of this country. So I wanted to somehow get that spirit in the music, and the music was quite easy. It was just like it needed to be groove based, and what was great again about that, talking about people who came to play on when we went to record it. So after 3 weeks, David, Omar, and Nathan, it was then down to me, and Laura came in February, the following February, and also Glenn Cochrane, who's a drummer, and Wilco, beautifully came and helped us out and did some stuff, wonderful playing. And the other person who helped us, who I was getting bored of my guitar playing, I was like, I need another flavour, Adrian Utley. Mm-hmm. And Adrian's such an old compadre, Portishead and Radiohead are, of the same era, and a huge amount of love and respect, I think definitely goes from us towards them, and I think it goes both ways. And he's such a phenomenal player, and it was just great. We did a second stint. Flood, Cecil, Richie, the other engineer, and I had a second stint in Wales in this house. And I phoned up Adrian and said, "Hey, do you want to come for the night and have some good food and just try some guitar?" And it was great. He did some guitar, and then him, Flood, and I just nattered into the early hours about all sorts.
You mentioned earlier the fact that you are going to be taking it out on the road.
Yeah.
You're playing some shows in North America in February. I saw the other day that you'd announced that you're going to be playing Bonnaroo in the summer. I'm sure there's more to come as well.
There's lots more. I mean, basically, it's proper touring.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they just get, we would tour over here, Europe,
Who's in the band, and how are you feeling about... I mean, I'm sure you've started rehearsals already, presumably,
No,
or about to?
I start rehearsals next week.
Okay, so how are you feeling about it broadly, and who's coming with you?
So the keyboard player I've got is Hanako Amori. She's been playing with Kate. She's phenomenal. I've got an amazing guitarist called Ross Chapman, who has deputized for Alex and everything. My rhythm section, I've got a bass player, Dilshan Abrahams. He's an incredible player as well. He's done some big stuff, big pop stuff. He was Kylie Minogue's bass player for years. Right. And then this drummer from New Orleans called Alvin Ford Jr., and he is steeped in New Orleans. His father's gospel drummer. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm nervous as well because, again, for me, it's different type of gig. I'm going to be the front man. How do I do that? But again, it's the start, and I'm just going to... What I really want to do is, rather than get nervous about it, and I want to enjoy every moment. I want to enjoy the nerves. I want to enjoy the insecurity, because I also think what's really great about this time is, you look at a lot of the musicians, I feel like it's a real age of authenticity. Mm. The biggest star, the biggest musician, or one of them, the biggest, grossest act on the planet is Ed Sheeran. And if you'd said this 20 years ago, that a guy could go out with just his guitar and be the biggest live act in the world, and the demeanor that he has, it's not like he's Dave Gahan or Bono. It's very different. And I've got a lot of respect for him. I mean, I think what's really interesting, and seeing Adele's performance at Glastonbury, what I loved about that headline slot was, wow, we're living in an age of authenticity. People can be themselves. And I think that's really, really important. When we were starting with Radiohead, it was almost like, the Wizard of Oz. You had to put on a front. Your frontman ideally was some kind of composite of Bono, Michael Stipe, Morrissey, Dave Gahan, all of those. There was the classic, and I feel like it's different now. And I think it's I actually think in Britain it feels like a really exciting time in music. The things that make me really happy about the current music scene, and I'm not in any way a part of it, but it's the whole black British scene. It's like the Stormzy, it's the Little Sims, it's Dave, all these people. It's like Green Tea Peng. It's like that to me is like, oh wow, this is what makes it exciting. And I think it broadens it, and it makes it, I just feel like everything's just more open now. I may be completely wrong.
No, it's definitely a lot of the kind of old artifice and the things that the kind of the cliches of
the male
old rock and roll.
It's boring. I mean, I know we kind of reacted against that anyway, and I'm not saying all those people that I've mentioned are extraordinary frontmen, you know, and Michael they're all brilliant, but I think they exhausted that generation, certainly our generation exhausted that possibility. I just find that whole notion, and I think we sort of finished it off, our generation finished off Oasis and Blur. It's just kind of boring now. Guys in bands, I mean, I'm sure there'll be a renaissance, but what I'm saying is maybe the expectations of how you should be, or the front that you put on, that's boring. People in bands making music is not boring, whether it's guys, you know, there is great music, great bands, you know. I just think that front, I think that's what I'm trying to get at. It's the front. It's trying to be something that you're not, or putting a front on and saying, you know, I'm like this, I'm this perfect human being, and we're going to market you in a way that makes you... It's like, I'm not interested in that. And maybe it's because I'm older, but I also genuinely feel like when you see people like Adele and, you know, you see Stormzy talk, or Sims, or Ed Sheeran, or anyone, people are themselves. And I love that. And maybe it's because the audiences now, they can sniff inauthenticity and bullshit a lot better.